definitely. The idea is very simple. If we are facing a crisis of the system, which is a crisis of values and of civilization, we must construct something else. It's not enough to say that we have to regulate the system. Of course, regulation of the system is probably necessary for transitional period, because you cannot ask Venezuela to stop the whole production of petroleum tomorrow. But we can ask them to have a plan of a transition, in spite of the fact that they are at the origin of terrible ecological destruction. So we have to define not only the aim, which is the common good of humanity, but we have to define also the ways. How can we achieve that? Otherwise it remains a dream. The dream is necessary, but not enough. So the idea is that we have to define, of course, a new paradigm that I call the common good of humanity, but can be called of any name. The problem is the content. What do we put behind this concept? The concept of common good of humanity as a counter concept to the paradigm of the capitalist system, which is a paradigm of debt for the earth, but also for mankind. And so to transform a paradigm of debt in a paradigm of life. How can we think an organization of the world which permit the creation, the reproduction, the betterment of life in the planet, of nature, and of life of human beings, which are a part of nature also. And this, I think, is the aim that we try to achieve in a fundamental reflection. Reflection done not only from the academic point of view, but also based on the experience of the people, the experience of exploitation, the experience of the oppressed people and social classes, and the experience of some achievements which are trying to correct and to transform the reality. And from the practical point of view, I think that we have to be concrete and see that any society must define its relations with nature. And the change of paradigm along that line is to pass from exploitation of nature at the service of the accumulation of capital to respect of nature, because it is the source of all life, of physical life, of cultural life, of spiritual life. And this, if we accept that principle, there are many, many concrete applications. We could say that again is a utopia. Who will accept that? But as a matter of fact, we see that there are many experiences in the world where people try to apply that. Perhaps they have no power for the moment, no political power, or not enough. But it exists. From another point of view, it has been possible for the capitalist system to impose international norms, for example, of the free commerce, of neoliberal orientation, So if it has been possible to impose at the international level norms of neoliberalism, it should be possible also to impose laws of respect of nature. So it is not an impossible thing. But of course, it will not happen by itself. It is only through social movement, through reflection, through information, that this will be able to happen. Same thing from the economic point of view. When you see that financial capital is dominating now the whole world economy, because it is the most rentable, the most profit. So the core of the capitalist system goes along with a totally virtual economy, an economy based on money made on money, and not on real construction or production of goods and services. So how to come to a privilege to the exchange value, which is the only value for the capitalism, because capital cannot be accumulated if you don't make of the whole reality a merchandise, a commodity, and to give the privilege to the use value. That means to what it brings to human beings, to nature, to be able to reproduce itself and to create and reproduce life. Now the use value exists, but is completely absorbed by the exchange value. There is a recognition of the use value at the condition that it serves to the exchange value. And if we accept that kind of principle, again we will have many concrete applications. We cannot accept anymore that the financial capital is dominating the world economy. We cannot accept the existence of tax havens. We cannot accept the existence of bank secrecy. All means of class struggle from the dominating classes. And so, again, maybe may appear as a utopia, but it is not a utopia, because already a part of the economy in the world is organized on the way of social economy, cooperatives, etc. And from another point of view, we know that the World Organization of Commerce is imposing norms for neoliberal economy, which even are obliged to be accepted by the different countries, with a court inside the World Organization of Commerce where there is no appeal. So they impose to countries the respect of neoliberal norms. Why cannot we also try within those institutions to impose norms at the service of the people and not at the service of the capital? If we take the democratic processes, the generalization of democratic processes is something fundamental. And this again is based on existing experience. Many organizations for the defense of human rights, many organizations for the rights of the women, of the peasants, of the workers, the students, etc. exist. And so the problem is how to bring all those experiences together in order to have enough strength to impose new norms the norms of generalization of democracy. And this would help precisely to democratize not only policy, but also economy. Nothing less democratic than the capitalist system, with the centralization of the decision power, but also democratic processes in very simple organizations, like sport, like culture, like religion, and also for the social relations between men and women, for example. So it is possible, and that can be applied. And finally, the culture, which is the capacity for human beings to read, to interpret reality, and also to foresee the future. We can try to bring together all kinds of cultures. Today, the progress and development is only thought within the Western culture, and you have to abandon, to marginalize, to suppress the other cultures in order to accept all the values of the Western culture, because it is the only one which defines progress, but which defines progress in terms of the capitalist system. So to bring about other knowledge, traditional knowledge, other cultures, other philosophies, other spiritualities, is extremely important to precisely build a new paradigm. It's very clear in Latin America or in Africa that traditional notions of the world, of world vision, are associated with a holistic vision of the whole, when the Western culture brought a segmentation of reality, without taking into account the effect that the development of certain aspects of technology, for example, of science, has on other aspects of life. You develop a technology, agrofuel, for example, and you just ignore all the destructions of nature that you provoke, but you pretend to produce green energy, which in fact is more destructive than the fossil energy for the environment. But that is only possible when you segmentize reality, when you don't take the vision of reality as a whole. And that is something which can be brought by traditional cultures. Not that we have to adopt all the creeds or of the traditional cultures and religion, but what we have to rediscover is the holistic approach to reality. And so with these concrete proposals, I think that we can build this idea of common good of humanity, which is more than the defense of common goods, which are very important, which is more than the idea of common good facing individual good, and which is really related with the defense of life. And like I said, we can call that any way and any name. You can call it in Latin America socialism of the 21st century, or you can call it Sumak Kosai, that means the good life, the Indians of Latin America. That has no importance. The important thing is the content. What can we promote? And precisely the importance is to bring this consciousness to everyone. Because here we see in the social forum many very interesting workshops, but very segmentized. And the whole problem is to see how each one can bring something for the whole. And that the struggle is one struggle. We struggle for the rights of women or for the workers, etc. Yes, and we don't have to abandon the specific struggle. But it is only a part of a whole struggle. And that should be, I think, developed as an awareness. If we are conscious of that, we must find the institution able to promote that. Then from an intellectual point of view, a global university is that. How to bring all those things together in order to promote a global consciousness of what has to be done, even in the smallest place of the world, till the United Nations, in order to bring about those 4 transformations which are the essential, the content of building the common good of humanity. And that is, of course, brings about the whole problem of the actors. Who will be able to promote that? And that is a great difficulty for the moment, because each one still is so much oriented by its own problem, and forget the rest of the world. I heard yesterday the discourse of the Secretary General of the trade unions here of Tunisia, and I read the declaration of the European and Latin American trade unions of a few days ago. And I was astonished by the fact that they really took all the aspects, also nature, also etc. But it was not put in a global vision. And the concrete conclusions was we have to fight for dignified labor, or we have to fight for better salaries, or we have to defend the pensions of the workers. Yes, true. But we have to defend the whole thing too. And it is only the convergence of all those actions which will bring about enough strength to change the system. Because for the moment, the system is too powerful. And use every means, and use also the segmentation of action in order to reproduce itself. So that is why I think we have to make steps forward to see how to come to the building of international consciousness and the building of instruments to increase this consciousness, and also instruments of common action.
So one of the focus of the Global University is to relate and to link socio-economic justice with ecological justice.
Yeah.
And I think the problem we see, as you just said, is that, for example, for the trade unions, they talk of social and economic justice. Of course, they also mention the question of nature, the question of ecology, but then the question of ecology doesn't really take such a primary importance.
Yeah.
So maybe you can say something about why, or is it maybe because there's too much the tradition of Marxism, where the question about productivity or the question about increasing social wealth has been too much important. And while at the same time we see that under modernization, in fact, there has been a lot of ecological disasters, catastrophes. We were just now in the session on Fukushima. Fukushima. And of course, it is the whole question about science and technology also, that humans feel that we can control. We are so advanced in our technology, and yet there are so many problems that are still left, which human beings still cannot possibly control. So, what would you say to the social movements, especially, which do not really have this, which do not really give this importance to the question of ecological justice?
Yeah. Well, I think it is precisely the fact that most of the movements are still in this idea of segmentation of reality, which is, as a matter of fact, a result of a kind of modernity developed by or kidnapped, as Latin American author says, by the capitalist logic. And so for the workers' movement to introduce this dimension should be more than just quoting the matter, but trying to show how the destruction of nature affects also the working class, and why the working class has to struggle for the betterment of relations with nature. In this sense, it is very interesting to see that Marx had seen that, and that he developed the idea that one of the effects of capitalism was to destroy the equilibrium of forget the word now, the equilibrium of the relation between man and nature. And he said this can have very grave consequences. The equilibrium of metabolism, exchange of material. And he said, of course, Marx said, the only way to rebuild this equilibrium is through socialism. But it has not been followed, neither by the classical Marxist thinkers, neither by the socialist countries, which have not taken this absolutely in account. Socialist countries have destroyed nature in the same way as the capitalist system. So the whole problem is to reintegrate this thinking, which show that the destruction of nature is linked with the capitalist logic, the same logic which exploits labor. And you cannot fight one without fighting the other. So that has to be integrated. And we can say the same thing for the women, for the peasants, of course, for all human groups. They are all affected by the type of exploitation of nature, and this should be integrated in their struggle. So that is precisely how to rebuild a holistic approach to the social struggle.